Hi, my name is Casey Zukowski, and today I will be speaking about rock and roll's impact on the free world. So, imagine this: a whole nation huddled around the TV in fear, confused, not knowing whether or not their whole country was about to go into a race war following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. In 1968. This was a reality for a lot of people. They were afraid, they were concerned, they didn't know if their whole livelihoods were about to change. So, my thesis statement is that rock and roll and the communities associated with it has and will continue to change the society in which we live in by offering suppressed voices a chance to speak out and express themselves. So, to prove my point, I'll be using Alan Freed, the impact of the radio and Elvis, James Brown, his performances, and his audience, and how they helped calm the nation following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And then I'll be getting into Little Richard and similar artists who helped break down the walls of segregation, and how a little bit more about the radio and how anyone could listen into whatever they wanted to, and it didn't matter if you were white or black because it was just about the music. So continuing on, here is Alan Freed on the left and Elvis on the right. So Alan Freed was a notable disc jockey in the 1950s. He coined the term rock and roll and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for doing so. He utilized the use of the radio, which is a fairly new technology at the time, to broadcast music to people all over the place in an 80-mile span of wherever the antenna was. And so before Elvis, blues were predominantly black music. You know, you didn't see white people going and seeing blues shows. You saw black people going to black bars because, first of all, segregation, and then it was just nothing got out of those walls. Whatever was in the black community was in the black community. Whatever was in the white community stayed in the white community. There wasn't any intermingling. So with the radio and this and that, this started to change, and it really started to change once Elvis, who was an overnight sensation, broadcasted his version of Blue Suede Shoes and brought blues and rock and roll to the white community, because here he was a white man singing these blues and shuffle or roots and blues songs. And now this created a domino effect that now the youth wanted to play rock and roll, and this just created a whole new world of what was happening in the U.S. So continuing on the left we see James Brown, and on the right we see Martin Luther King Jr. So James Brown was notably known in the U.S. for having these soulful performances that it was beyond the music. It wasn't just about him. It wasn't about the music. People were there to sing and dance and to feel the music, and it's just amazing things that were happening. But anyways, continuing on, following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., this nation was kind of up in the air. We didn't know if all the cities were about to be burned down by these race riots that were happening. People were confused, concerned, the livelihoods were about to change. So, the government knew that this was happening, and they actually came to James Brown, the Boston government, and asked him, would he broadcast his live performance in an effort to keep people inside so they won't go out and riot. And this actually had a great impact on these race riots. It reduced the amount of people going to them because people could stay in their home and watch James Brown. And in a brief 5-minute speech that he gave, he said that we should continue on Martin Luther King's peaceful protest legacy. And, and that's what happened. And a lot of people stayed inside and watched that, and they rethought what was happening, and they thought, it was a unfortunate experience, yes, but they should not go and do something chaotic and crazy. Instead, they should continue Martin Luther King's legacy and protest peacefully. So continuing on, here we see Little Richard and a segregated audience. So during the 1950s, to see even that was rare, because most of the time these performers would either go to a black bar or a white bar, and they'd only play for a white audience or a black audience. So this all started to change when radio people could listen to songs on the radio and they'd be like, hey, I like that song. I want to go see that performer. And Little Richard was, probably the best example of this because he would sing songs that were aimed at the white community. So white people would be listening, and he had a white audience that really wanted to see him. And so he would be touring around the US and he'd get off the bus, and a lot of times people would give him dirty looks because they're like, what are you doing here? And he'd be like, I'm the performer. And so a lot of people just like him really started to break down these racial walls because a white audience wanted to listen to him, and they already paid for the tickets, so they're not gonna do anything too crazy. But in some places, they get off the bus and they get right back on the bus because that was the time, But anyways, today we see the impact of all this stuff, and there's still a lot that needs to be addressed. And rock and roll isn't quite as prevalent as it used to be, but music is still very prevalent. And when I say rock and roll, I mean music. Rock and roll is just a good term that, with a lot of examples of the time. But anyways, in conclusion, rock and roll has the ability to navigate this country through difficult times and places by allowing the suppressed voices a chance to speak out and express themselves. So I would like you all to think about the world we live in today and how far we have come and how far we still have to go, because, despite how good it all may seem, there's still a lot of injustices and this and that are happening. So anyways, that is my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening.